Hello, everyone. I'm Matt Landis, and you are listening to the Tink Club podcast. On this episode, we had the great honor to speak with Dennis Mckenna. His most recent book, The Brotherhood of the Screaming Abyss, is an autobiography and personal account of his life with his brother Terrence. Although I highly recommend this book to everyone, I believe it should be mandatory for anybody who has an interest in the realm of psychedelics and consciousness exploration. I'm sure most of you listening are fans of Terrence McKenna's work, so learning about him and his life through the eyes of his dearest confidant is an absolutely wonderful experience. I can honestly go on forever about how much I enjoyed this book, but you will certainly discover this for yourself. You can order your own copy on Amazon or go to brotherhoodofthescreamingabyss.com to find all the information you need. I want to express how grateful we here at the Tink Club are to Dennis for taking the time to speak with us, and how much we appreciate you listeners allowing us to do this every week. So tune in, turn on, and sit back as we explore the jungle of consciousness with Dennis Mckenna. Welcome back to the Tink Club. I am Matt Landis.
And I'm Chris Conti.
I'm Tim King.
And we are here today with a very, very special guest. He is a founding member of the Heffter Research Institute, a nonprofit organization whose primary focus involves research into psychedelic pharmacology and ethnobotany. He has dedicated his life to understanding the role that drugs play in our culture and the cultures of the past by marrying the languages of science and spirituality in a way that is accessible and meaningful. He's also the author of The Brotherhood of the Screaming Abyss, a memoir about life with his brother Terrence and their famed experiment at La Chorrera. He is here today to help us traverse what he so eloquently calls the primrose path to psychedelic perdition. Please welcome Dennis Mckenna.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes.
Could you?
That's the best introduction I've had in a while.
Awesome. Could you, for our listeners who might not know, could you just give us a little background about the Heffter Research Institute and the work that you're currently doing there in regards to psychedelics?
Sure. Heffter Research Institute. It's named after the Arthur Heffter, who's the scientist who first isolated mescaline as a pure compound. So, in 1897, I believe it was. So he exemplified a lot of what we identified with. So, you know, in the choices we could have called it, we settled on Arthur Heffter. It seemed better than Timothy Leary. But it's a nonprofit. It's basically, we're a bunch of scientific nerds. We're neuroscientists, pharmacologists, clinicians. I'm the ethnobotanist. I'm the one that they keep, you know, in the basement or in the attic, but they let me out sometimes. And we're basically very science-oriented. Most of the folks come out of academics, and we're a nonprofit. We're like MAPS, but we're less political and certainly less well-known, right, and sadly less well-funded. Mm-hmm. However, we're most of the leading researchers on the science frontier for psychedelics are either on our board or being supported in part by us and or both. So, I think for, a modestly funded organization that, we get stuff done. We don't use a lot of our money for publicity or anything else. We use it strictly for the science. We have very low overhead. Mm-hmm. And if people want to find out more about what we're up to, go to heffter.org, HEFFTER.org. And you can find out who the board members are, and we're currently involved in a number of clinical studies that, without really planning on it, it seems that we've staked out psilocybin as our territory, as our focus, much like MAPS has staked out MDMA. Right, we don't claim any territoriality about it. It's just the stuff that we have been investigating. Psilocybin seems to be the medicine that lends itself well to clinical studies, the kind of stuff we're doing. So, you can go to the website and look at the board. It's pretty impressive, and also there's a description of all our clinical work and so on. So,
what are the studies you're actually working on right now with psilocybin?
Oh, I can't even tell you a number of different ones. We've had some of the leading lights. We've had studies related to end of life, people's existential anxiety in the face of death. The psilocybin seems very good for helping people come to terms with that and, dealing with that. We have an alcoholism study underway. We're about to start a PTSD study. We have the most spectacular one right now. We've just completed a fellow at Johns Hopkins, Matt Johnson, who's a resident there working under Roland Griffiths, who's kind of the head guy there. But Matt conducted a study with smoking cessation that's recently published. Really amazing results. A very small sample. 80% of those people are tobacco-free 6 months later.
Which is insane. Which is an insane percentage.
A very high percentage. Nothing else works like that. And these were serious 40-year, 3-pack-a-day smokers, seriously addicted.
Right. We actually had a podcast. Matt he used psilocybin to quit smoking cigarettes. He microdosed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know if you remember at Alex Gray's Cosm a few weeks ago, I actually asked you while you were giving your presentation whether or not you guys were doing any research into it, and you referred me to that study. And it was successful for me. I've tobacco-free now since October, so,
Well, there you go. There's no arguing with success.
That's right.
I mean, I was quite surprised, when they seriously proposed that it might be effective for that, because you see tobacco used in shamanic traditions all the time. I was a smoker for years, a pipe. I didn't smoke cigarettes. I smoked a pipe. But certainly taking my share of mushrooms during that time, never had any inclination to quit. I mean, I enjoyed it, right? And I enjoyed it even smoking mushrooms. I never, smoking while taking mushrooms. It never led me to want to quit. What probably led me to quit was when Roland said, well, you really ought to enroll in our anti-smoking study, because I'd hate to enroll you in the end-of-life study.
Right.
So, I kind of get it here, Roland. All right, for you, I'll do it. And I did. I gave up my pipe, and I'm pretty much tobacco-free. I smoke when I'm around smokers.
Yeah.
Which isn't all the time. So basically, I'm a non-smoker. I'm a facultative smoker.
Right.
I just try and stay away from bad people.
Right. I know that sometimes they use tobacco in ayahuasca ceremonies, so I'm sure you experience it that way. But I wouldn't consider that as part of a smoking habit. That's just part of the process.
It's not. That's part of the process. Yeah. Exactly. It's ceremonial and it's okay in that context.
Wow. So let's get into the book, right?
Okay.
How did it come into fruition? I know there was an Indiegogo campaign and...
Well, it was actually a Kickstarter campaign.
Sorry.
Yeah. And I was... it was the farthest thing from my mind to do that. It was... I was in New York City in 2011. I'd been thinking about writing this book, and I talked to Terrence's old agent, Dan Levy, who lives in New York and still maintains the Levity.com website.
Yes,
where a lot of Terrence. So Dan, so I said, can you put me in touch with a publisher that will give me an advance so I can write this book? And he said, well, I could do that, but there's this whole new thing out there, Kickstarter. This was like 2011. And he said, yeah, you want to take a shot at it, And so I looked at Kickstarter and it looked like a pretty good opportunity. So I did put it up there, and I actually made more money than anybody had ever made to that time for a book project.
Oh, awesome.
I raised $90,000.
Oh, wow.
Congratulations.
Which totally blew my mind, but it's great. Because it gave me essentially, self-funded sabbatical. I could take a year off and write it,
yeah,
and then I had money to promoted and printed and all those things. So it was very successful.
Yeah.
Now that it's out there, I've learned the dark side of publishing your own stuff.
Yeah.
Which is that you're everything. You're the warehouse manager. You're the shipping captain. You're the promoter. You do it all. You have no publishing company backing you up. Mm-hmm. But for all that, it's been pretty successful.
Yeah.
It's been okay. I still have lots of books to sell. It's on Amazon, but I had to take a lot of them off because they started charging me huge inventory storage fees as
really?
they age. They crank up the storage fees.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So now I have a warehouse. Well, I have a storage container full of a couple thousand copies.
Wow. Gotcha.
I'm open to deals. Somebody wants to buy 1,000 copies. Let's talk. But I doubt that will happen. I am looking for distributor opportunities, though. But so that's the situation.
What was your process of actually getting into the flow of writing the book? Were there roadblocks? Was there a mindset you had to get into? Places you visit?
Well, people talk about writer's block, and I didn't have any with this book. I think I had a very personal story that I wanted to tell for a long time. I've wanted to tell essentially my side of the Terry and Denny thing, right?
Yeah.
Terrence he's published books. Probably the most personal one being True Hallucinations,
right,
which really focuses just on a small slice, a very critical part of our lives, but an important one. This book is about our entire lives. It's a memoir. It's about growing, My Life with Terrence Mckenna is the subtitle.
right.
And it starts really before either of us were born, with our family history, and then just comes up to all through what happened in our lives, and finally ends with Terrence's passing. So which, when I look back on it this month, 15 years, and it's just incredible that, to me, that he's been gone so long.
Yeah.
But I guess, obviously he has. It just doesn't seem that long. And then you realize how quickly, I guess in that context, you realize how quickly you're on the fast track toward your own oblivion, But hopefully I got a few years left. So,
well, we hope so too.
I hope so. And, what's interesting about the Terrence phenomenon is that he's never really left the building.
That's right.
You know what I mean? He's still very much in the dialogue, in the conversation, and
maybe
that's
more so than ever.
Yeah,
more so than ever in some ways.
Yeah.
I just saw something in the paper the other day about just today. Do you know Selena?
Yes.
The rock star? Yeah. She died
Passed
in the
away.
mid-90s.
Yes.
Well, she's going on tour very shortly. Her hologram is going on tour.
No
and
way.
Some people are saying, my God, this is great. And other people are saying, I can't believe this is so sick. But I'm thinking, you could do that with Terrence.
Yeah. Yeah, you
and
could.
actually somebody started a digital Terrence project a while back. I don't know where it's gone, but that would be, I'm sure that somebody is probably trying to do this. This would be interesting.
Huh. I've heard Terrence talk about virtual reality and a DMT trip, and I can picture him just doing the intro or giving you the pipe, and then you have the Oculus Rift just take you into the other realm.
Yes. Well, I think it would be amused. I think it would be amused, and also, he's done something very few people in the world have done. He's got this kind of virtual immortality.
That's right.
And his ideas, most of which were, at the height of his career, mid-90s, were very much ahead of their time, and they're still ahead of their time.
Absolutely.
And so extremely perceptive cultural commentator, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Hey, he was quite the storyteller, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, that's the Irish in him, right?
the bard, right? In Brotherhood of the Screaming Abyss, you mentioned how, I don't know if you still feel this way about how his talks being distributed via the internet is kind of like not exactly a great thing, but at the same time, I mean, it's something that you want to see happen, but it's like, would he have wanted that to happen during his life?
I think so. Did I say he wouldn't?
No.
Oh.
Just mentioned that it's like not a great thing for somebody that, it's not like he could make money off of, digital sales in a sort of way.
Well, he can't make money off of it, but, his word lives forever,
yeah.
And it's so widespread. I mean, he has his intellectual properties, his books,
right,
and so on, and the family, his children all knows, and they still get royalties from those things. The rest of it is just out there, and it's hard to make a case that, these are intellectual properties. I mean, everything Terrence may have said, it's I don't know what. It's a national treasure.
We agree.
Nobody owns it. Nobody owns it, and you can't restrict it or protect it anyway. And I think he'd be just fine with that.
Yeah.
Information wants to be free.
That's right.
Some of the parts of the book are deeply personal. Where there's some really tough parts for you to write and bring up from the past, or there's some rough spots for you.
To write this book, yeah, there were. But I wanted to write an honest book. And for me, that was part of the motivation to write it. I mean, it was part of my grieving, I guess, which, even though it was 2012, 12 years after he died, but it was I still miss him, of course, and I still grieve, and so in a sense, it was part of me working some of that stuff out in a personal way and sharing it with people. And I've been criticized, and people said, well, these are too intimate, too personal. You shouldn't share them with the public. But I feel like Terrence has a very special public. And that was the sense that I got during the Kickstarter campaign. I mean, it wouldn't have worked if there wasn't an existing Terrence Mckenna fan base. And when you say fan base, it doesn't really do it justice.
Right.
Terrence Mckenna is beloved. He's a loved guy.
Yeah.
And a lot of people feel a personal connection. So I feel that sense of family, and I don't feel that I'm sharing anything that, is too intimate, because people are not looking for the dirt. I mean, there's plenty of dirt. So what? It was part of him. So I think it's fine. And it was good for me. It was really good for me to be able to honestly, share our relationship and share as siblings. I don't know. Got any brothers, you guys?
I have two sisters.
Yeah.
I have a brother and a sister.
Yeah.
Well, as you know, in relationship with siblings, it's not always smooth.
Right.
And we fought like cats and dogs, and we had disagreements throughout our lives, but for all that, we loved each other, and that's just part of the dynamic. So for me to make criticisms of him, or, not everything he said I agree with. I have real problems with the time wave and all that. But this is, I'm not saying anything in public that I haven't said directly to him.
Right.
Exactly. And it's not about trying to put it down. It's about saying that, honest discussion of these ideas, and that's also one of the things I like about Terrence. He was never he never accepted the role of guru. It wasn't that I'm laying down the truth here and you have to believe it. It's more like, and throwing out all these crazy ideas.
Right.
You know, I think they're neat. You can pick and choose, and if you like them, yeah, that's great. If you don't, well, that's fine too.
Right.
You know, but he wanted people to think.
Right.
He was more about stimulation of thought, not control of thought. You know.
Yeah.
So
just like any great teacher.
Yeah.
Right.
Just like any great teacher.
You know, I actually, I think that Brotherhood of the Screaming Abyss is one of the most readable books I've ever read.
Yeah, I feel like you were talking.
I flew through it. I'm a pretty avid reader, but feel like I read that book faster than any other book that I've read. Sure, the subject matter meant a lot to me, but you're a really great writer.
Well, thank you. That's kind of you to say. Most people do seem to like it.
Yeah.
They really do. And I have to say, I have to give this credit. The secret sauce that makes it a good book was my editor.
Hmm.
You know, I mean, I contributed, but I had a fantastic editor.
Yeah.
And Jerry Creedon was his name, and he was so good. He used to be the editor of the Utley Reader, and he lives here, and he's just a master wordsmith, and we worked very closely on it. I mean, I wanted to actually make him a co-author, but he would not accept that. He would just say, "No, that's I'm just an editor. This is what editors do." You know, okay, Jerry, if you feel that way about it. But yeah, if you ever need anybody that needs a good editor, I highly recommend him. He's a fantastic guy.
Can we talk about the first time you actually took psychedelics and what brought you into this whole world?
Sure, we can talk about it. Yeah, the first time I took the first ever psychedelic I took was morning glory seeds back in the 60s, because that was all you could get, you know, and that was probably about 1965, something like that. And if you probably weren't even alive then, right? But back in around that time, this article came out in, I think it was Time magazine, about, you know, and by this time psychedelics were already in our radar. But this article came out in Time magazine about these morning glories, and did you know that you could just go down to your local, garden shop and buy these hallucinogenic seeds? And I'm like, no, I didn't know that, but I'm so on it.
Right.
And I did. I went down and I bought them, and my friend and I took them, and it was ambiguous. Didn't do a lot. It made us sick. It didn't really seem to go anywhere.
Right.
But it was an intimation maybe of what was there, and then later, my first real psychedelic encounter was in Berkeley in 1967 with LSD.
Right.
When a friend of mine, it was the summer of love, right? LSD was everywhere. There was no quality control. It was some hippie, scruffy looking dude on the street that sold us these aspirin, with this little blue dot in the center.
Wow.
Oh yeah, this is really good, man, He was true to his word. We went up to Tilden Park above Berkeley, and he and my friend Bob and I took that stuff, and we had a wonderful afternoon. It was not at all what we expected.
Mm-hmm.
We were thinking hallucinations and a sort of visual trip. Very little of that. We were literally we reverted to our primate roots, and we were literally, we were literally swinging on vines and beating on logs and being, very much the kind of Tarzan kind of thing. I mean, it was all about that. It was all about nature, and it was about being,
connected
in this state.
Mm-hmm.
Primal howl.
Yeah, exactly. It was wonderful. It was a great experience, and then that was really the first one, and then we found my brother was into DMT at the time, which was very rare.
Yeah.
Wasn't around a lot, but I didn't take it when I was in Berkeley, but I took some home with me. As you know, you've read the book. And then encountered that fairly shortly. And it was really, DMT that got us intensely interested in these psychedelics. It was, LSD, mescaline, all these things, cannabis, of course, they were interesting. But when we had DMT, it totally shattered our worldview. Right. And we thought this stuff is, this isn't just the most interesting drug we've ever experienced. It's the most interesting thing in our universe, right? Period. And so how can we ignore it?
Right. That's right.
We've got to investigate this as curious people, and probably with some pretenses to being scientists, but we weren't. Obviously, we had no. But we did have that quality that's important in science, which is curiosity.
Right.
And we thought, well, the frustrating thing about DMT, if you've experienced it, which you probably have, it's so short and it's so overwhelming that you can't come out of it with a lot. You come out of it with a sense of astonishment, something really amazing has happened, but beyond that, you can't make a lot of sense out of it other than that. And so we thought naively enough, but also, correctly enough, that if we could spend more time in that place, we might get a better handle on it. We might get our sea legs if we could spend, an hour there, a couple hours there, see what was going on. So that was what led us to go to South America, because we stumbled on this paper by Schultes, which was R.E. Schultes, the famous ethnobotanist. The title of it was Varrola as an orally active hallucinogen. And Varrola is a genus of trees in the nutmeg family that is used as a source of snuffs in various parts of South America. The Yanomamo, particularly, they cook down the bark and they cook down the sap, actually, which is full of tryptamines, DMT, 5-methoxy DMT. They powder it up and they make a snuff out of it, which they blow through each other's nose through these 3-foot-long pipes, and so that alone is enough to set you back. But what Schultes was writing about was same plants, but prepared as an orally active preparation by the Witoto Indians and related tribes, the Bora and the Muinani. That instead of powdering the material, they cook it down. They concentrate this resin, and they roll it into little balls, and they roll ashes on it, and then they take that, and take a piece maybe the size of your thumb, not very much, and you take it, and supposedly it has an instant effect, and is very strong. When we actually got to Varrola, it took a while to actually access this. In fact, 10 years later, when I went back to South America to do my graduate work, this was one of the focuses of my research, was to these orally active hallucinant Varrola preparations. The other side of it was ayahuasca, and my thesis was a comparison between the chemistry and pharmacology of ayahuasca and the chemistry and pharmacology of ukuhe, as this thing was called. Totally different plant sources, similar chemistry involving tryptamines, oral activity, and so on. And so eventually we did find, the problem with the ukuhe is it's a disappearing tradition. When we went to La Chorrera, we went there because that was the ancestral home of the Witoto people.
Gotcha.
We were totally unaware of the fact that William Burroughs had been down that same trail,
Right.
Back in the 50s. I mean, that's total coincidence. We went to La Chorrera because that's where we thought we would get the okume.
Yeah.
Right.
And and that's. But when we the La Chorrera thing 10 years later, when I was doing my work in Peru, it was in the same area but south of the Putumayo. The Putumayo being the river that separates Colombia and on the north and Peru on the south. Mm-hmm. So when I went there, when I went to that area, it wasn't the ancestral home that Witoto had been forcibly relocated south of the Putumayo. So it was a dying culture. It was not very intact. And the first thing to go in such situations is usually the shamanic traditions, knowledge of the plant medicines, and so on. So the people there were saying, well, we sort of remember how our grandfathers did this. We don't really do this anymore, but we'll try to make it for you.
Right.
And they did. They were happy to try. Some of the samples that we got were inactive as far as I could tell, and others did work. And when we got it back to the lab, had a pretty good correlation. I mean, I was able to do analysis on them, and the ones that had the most activity were, basically high in tryptamine. Actually, 5-methoxy DMT more than DMT, and the ones that lacked activity didn't have any alkaloids. There's a great deal of variation in these varrolas in the field, and they all look similar. So anyway, that's what got us into this.
Did you take ayahuasca for the first time? Was it down there during that trip, or was it a different time?
No, it was actually during that trip in 1981. I had taken ayahuasca once when I was living in Hawaii. Terrence and Kat had been to South America, been to Peru, when was it? 1976, I think. And they were looking for ayahuasca, and they brought back some ayahuasca, and they gave me some ayahuasca, and I took it in my living room in my apartment in Honolulu. Didn't do much. It made me sick. That's what it did. And then when I went to South America on this field work as a graduate student, I went first to Pucallpa. I spent a while with this guy, Don Fidel, which I describe in the book. And that's really when I first had serious encounters with ayahuasca.
Wow. I want to ask your opinion about shamans. Do you find them necessary? I've heard stories of sexual abuse and people abusing people that are during the ceremony. I mean, how do you feel about those reports? And would you rather a shaman, or would you rather not a shaman be there?
I think it depends on the shaman.
Right.
And there are now that this ayahuasca tourism thing is going.
Right. That's my point.
There are reports of sexual abuse. It does go on, no doubt about it. Mm-hmm. And it's not about ayahuasca. This sort of stuff goes on with any kind of cult-like situation. You can see the same thing in yoga ashrams, and the same thing where you've got vulnerable people who are looking up to somebody with authority and power, and that's what the dynamic is.
Okay.
So obviously I don't approve of that. I think that I think it's inevitable, but I don't think it's good, and I think it's a measure of kind of the quality of a shaman. That they're not predators. This is not too much to ask.
Right. Of course.
They need to have enough of a moral compass about themselves to realize that this is not appropriate. And but I just don't know how prevalent it is.
Yeah.
But it shouldn't go on. I don't think that a shaman is essential to learn about these psychedelics. I think that because the psychedelic is the shaman, or not, the psychedelic is the teacher in a way. You're the shaman. Mm-hmm. All a good shaman does is create the space, sort of create the good setting and the right atmosphere through whatever they do, the Icaros and the other things they do to create the space. But ultimately, it's between you and the teacher plant, whether that's mushrooms or ayahuasca or whatever. I think that ayahuasca lends itself more to a ritual situation, and I do like it that way.
Right.
But I do not say that you must go with the shaman. Right. I mean, I think, that's the beautiful thing about psychedelics is they're an intensely individual thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't have to have faith. You don't have to follow really any rules. I mean, you can look at guidelines and you look at what makes sense, but ultimately the responsibility is on you. And it's like, okay, here's an experience. Yeah. Make of it what you will, Yeah. And some people may say this was a transcendent experience and most fantastic thing that ever happened to me, and other people may say, I felt like I was toxified and poisoned, and both are legitimate, things to take away from it.
Mm-hmm. I know you experienced photosynthesis on one of your trips. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. That was a really profound trip.
Right.
And it's one of my most profound early trips on ayahuasca. And it's been, I've told that story and it's on YouTube a few times reading from the book. But long story short, I was with the UDV. I'd been down there for a conference. This was 1991. And they were thinking about doing a biomedical study of ayahuasca, of Huasca, as they call it. The UDV is this church, right, in Brazil. União de Vegetal is what it stands for. And they were under pressure from the government to show that ayahuasca, or huasca, which is basically the Portuguese equivalent, was not dangerous, and that they weren't just a bunch of drug abusers, and so part of their strategy was let's conduct a biomedical investigation of it, and let's have foreign investigators come in and do whatever they want, do some analysis of our practice and the people, and do all this evaluation. So, and eventually we did that. But in 1991, that we were in the planning stages, essentially, they invited myself and a number of investigators in different areas, anthropologists, chemists, pharmacologists, doctors, and so on, to this conference outside Sao Paulo, in which all these things were discussed. And, and that's where we came up with the idea to do a biomedical study. Mm-hmm. But then after the conference, they wanted to be sure that everyone had a good experience, that they got it, on an experiential level. And so they got us together in this temple, which was close to the conference center. It was actually a summer camp where we had the conference. Right next door was their temple. So, 500 people were there on the final night of the conference, came to this thing, 500 people. And along with all the dignitaries, of which I guess I was one. And, and so we took the brew and, unfortunately, we didn't understand Portuguese, so we were not really expected to pay attention to what was going on. So we were free to go inside and look inside. And what happened to me in this introspective state, we've just been endless raps, round tables, PowerPoints, all kinds of discussions like conferences are. And of course, I'm going into the state and I'm thinking about all this, turning it over in my mind. And I was thinking about how the UDV characterize ayahuasca as a combination of the force and light, right? It's force and light. And the force being the Banisteriopsis vine, the MAO inhibition that drives the thing, and the light being the chacruna, And I thought, the light being the source of the DMT, right? The chacruna, the leaf. And so I was just thinking about, they had talked about that. This is our view of it, and I thought how very apt a description that really was. And, and about the time I was thinking about that this voice came over my left shoulder, and it was basically something like, you want to see force? I'll show you force.
Oh, man.
And it was, thrown down as a challenge, and it was all about, and then it was thrown down, but it wasn't like, no thanks. I think I'll pass this time. It was like, no, you don't have a choice, boy. You're gonna see force. And so the next thing I knew, I was, in this state where I started, I was like transformed, translocated to, above the Amazon basin. And I was at the top of this world tree, which was, a huge Banisteriopsis vine. So, with its roots down in the Amazon, and I was like in orbit or something. I was like, in space, and I was looking down, and I could see. So all those shamanic themes about the world tree and the axis of the world and all that were there. And so I had that view. And then the next thing I knew, I was transformed. I was translocated down into the roots of I was translocated down into the underground, into the, I guess, rhizosphere, you could call it, underneath the rhizosphere of the Banisteriopsis vine. And I was a water molecule. I saw the whole process of photosynthesis from the standpoint of a water molecule, which is one of the chief reactants in photosynthesis, right? It's water, carbon dioxide, and sunlight that puts the magic together. And I was, I was a botanist, so I understood the process fairly well from a biochemical point of view and in the abstract. But suddenly here I am, I'm this water molecule, and I'm in this huge, like, cistern of water underneath the Amazon basin, and I'm being translocated with billions of other water molecules up through the roots and into the leaf and into the chloroplast, and then going through that whole process. Because one of the things about photosynthesis is, have you ever studied any of this biochemistry? Or, yeah, you have. So the light, the chlorophyll harvests the light. In order, what it does with that energy is essentially splits water. It ionizes water, and the oxygen is released from that process, and the two hydrogens, the protons, that are left from H2O are used to reduce another reactant in the reaction change, and then that's used to reduce carbon. So that's the basic. That's how carbon is changed from carbon dioxide into an organic compound and brought into the world, into the biosphere, and without going through every step, which I probably couldn't remember anyway. But I was going through this whole process, and I was going through it as from the point of view of a water molecule, which happens to be the entity that is completely destroyed in this process. It's literally shattered by the energy of the sunlight. Right. So this is the force. It is the force. If you think about it, it's an incredible force. Yeah. It's what brings energy in a useful form into the biosphere. By binding sunlight essentially into organic molecules. So, it is, I think at the time, and I've said in the book, it is, E. Cummins called it, something like the green fuse that drives the flower. So, the hippies talked about flower power, flower power, kind of, this soft idea. But actually, flower power is the most important force in nature, at least in our biosphere, because without it, we wouldn't be able to survive. I mean, plants produce the oxygen that lets things like us survive, as well as all the useful compounds that we use for everything else, including food. So it is an incredible force, and it's also the force that maintains the homeostatic, systems in the biosphere that are trying to keep life sustainable on Earth, and that we're busily working to undermine as quickly as we can. But, so far we haven't won, and we better hope that we don't win. And so that also was, a message that came out of this. This whole thing, it was more than just a lesson in biochemistry. It was a profoundly moving kind of thing, because as I saw this, then I was just overcome with this feeling of sadness and feeling about, what are they doing to the Amazon? And how can this be going on? And it was all about how we have to stop this if possible. And so it was an emotional thing for me, And then at the end, if you've read the episode, at the end, the voice came back and said, well, you monkeys only think you're running the show, which I say many times, and I truly believe it. And the other thing is, we're not going to let this happen. Right. Basically, we being the rest of the biosphere, and you monkeys are out of control, and you need to get in control. You need to get in control of yourselves, and or we may have to take drastic measures. So we'll see what happens.
Right.
Jeez.
I don't worry about the survival of life on the planet. I think that life can exist in very broad parameters.
Right.
Humans, not so much.
Right. George Carlin has that quote. It's that the Earth will be fine. It's the people that are fucked.
Yeah. And if the people went away tomorrow, the Earth would be fine, and it would probably begin to heal itself at that point. Because, it really has a tendency toward homeostasis, and it's a self-healing system.
Right.
But if you keep pushing it, there are limits. There are tipping points beyond which you can't fix it. And we're getting close to that.
Right.
If you believe the science, and I do, I tend to think that we're getting close to that. And the problem is that we're, as a species, we're just not waking up.
Yeah.
We're just not waking up.
I know. Yeah. What do we need to do?
Take more ayahuasca. For one thing. No, seriously.
Yeah.
We have to take more ayahuasca, introduce other people to it, propagate the plants, spread the plants around. This is maybe the best tool that we have to change hearts and minds, because so many people come away from their ayahuasca experience, especially if they take it in the Amazon, but anywhere really, they come away with this sort of renewed love for the planet and this new ecological perspective, this appreciation of nature and the oneness of nature, and the realization that we're part of nature. We don't rule it, we don't control it, we don't own it, but we are part of it, and we have to. Our job is to do as little damage as possible. Our job is to nurture it, but not from the sense that we control it, just to do what is what is nurturing for it. And we're trying to overcome at least 2,000 years of, this Judeo-Christian perspective,
right,
which is very much anti-nature.
Right, absolutely.
It's all about, God said, you own nature. You must subdue nature.
Right.
It's
We're in control.
Right.
We're in control.
But we're not.
And not only that, salvation is not to be found in this world. It's found in the next world. So it leads to this mindset of devaluing nature.
Right.
And that's a very dangerous thing. Well, we're seeing the effects of it. We're seeing the effects of this now. So one thing we need to, I never miss an opportunity to criticize these religions, because I think they've led us down a primrose path.
Right. This is one of my questions for you too, about psychedelics and faith, and how, for you, I'm curious of how it broke down the walls of religion for you. That was one of my questions I had.
Well, I don't know if it really broke down the walls. By the time I got to psychedelics, I'd already pretty much rejected religion. Any 12-year-old who actually looks at the situation can tell that this is empty. I think there's a core of truth in these religions on the moral side and all that. I certainly don't. I think that Jesus was a great teacher, if he ever existed at all.
Right.
But the teachings are solid. It's all the dogma and the hierarchy and the baggage that's been placed on top of this.
Right.
Religion has been working, organized religion, they're terrified of meaningful direct experience. They talk about the direct experience of the transcendent, but no, it's got to go through the priests. You can't have people going off and having these direct experiences. So unfortunately, this is one of the problems. Our religious institutions are just hollowed out shells of what they were meant to be, and they're not religious anymore. They're political institutions. They're designed to control people's behavior.
Of course.
And importantly, to shut people up.
Mm-hmm. Right, of course.
Yeah. So I think that psychedelics are, this is one reason why people are reaching out to ayahuasca and other things. They want meaningful experiences, and our society does not provide those, and so they go to South America and in search of something, and a lot of them do find meaningful experiences.
Do you ever think that, I'm sure you agree that psychedelics affect the process of individuation, to use a sort of Jungian idea, and a lot of people would say these are like shortcuts to those things. Do you agree with that? Or
cheating?
Yeah.
No. Obviously no. That answer is obvious. I don't think they're shortcuts. I think that to use them properly, you have to approach them as a discipline.
Right.
There are a lot of things you have to do. Not everybody is going to become an ayahuasca shaman, but there is a process of learning. They're not shortcuts. Shortcuts to what? If they get you to a place where, you have a spiritual experience and it has an impact and it changes your life and it's personally meaningful, then how is that a shortcut? Right. That's what I think. I think, it all comes down to, to neurochemistry in a way. We're all in a neurochemical brain state all the time. We inhabit this hallucination that we've chosen to call reality, and it's a false argument to say, well, you had this mystical experience, but you didn't come by the natch, on the natch, so it's false. It's not a valid mystical experience because you didn't work 20 years and meditate every day and walk on your knees and flagellate yourself so it's not genuine.
Mm-hmm.
I just totally disagree. I feel like if the experience, you judge the experience based on what it is, what its meaning is for you.
Yes.
And, it's just as legitimate as any other kind of experience. It may not involve torture and ordeals. It doesn't have to. The point is that you get the same, lesson.
Yeah.
And you can tell, I mean, if you want to argue about brain states, you can put your spontaneous mystic in an fMRI and see what happens, what lights up in their brain when they're having a mystical experience. And you can put somebody on psilocybin who's having a mystical experience, and you'll see very much the same brain state, brain areas and so on are activated. Mm-hmm. So I don't buy this, I don't buy this idea. People are forgetting we're always high on something because we're high on our own neurochemistry, right? We're biochemical engines running on hormones and neurotransmitters.
Right.
That's what makes it run. What are those things? They're drugs. Yeah. Right? That's what I mean when I say, we're made out of drugs. Outside the body, those things would be called drugs. It's just that our body happens to make them. So we don't look at them like drugs, but they are drugs.
And in regard to these experiences, we talked to Diana Slattery 2 nights ago, and I asked her, does it make a difference whether or not the experience you're having under a psychedelic is real? And she couldn't really answer that because she said, that's a deep question, but does it really matter? It doesn't.
It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
I mean, it comes back to it's real enough.
Right, exactly.
Which could be said of reality, which we're in. I mean, we know that reality, if you want to believe physics, we know that this world that we construct for ourselves is a hallucination.
That's right.
Physics tells us that the actual world doesn't look anything like this. Mm-hmm. It's a bunch of energy fields and vibrations and so on. Of course, that's what our instruments tell us, and we're still interpreting those instruments through our sensory neural apparatus. So reality is overrated in a certain. Who was it? Lily Tomlin said reality. Reality is a crutch for people who can't handle drugs, which I think is not a bad thing. I mean, we're all in the neurochemical brain state all the time, whether you're having a natural mystical experience or a drug-induced mystical experience, or, you're just in ordinary state of consciousness. Yeah. It still is reflected by a neurochemical brain state. So what's happening for you is real. And like Diana said, well, it's real enough. If you interact with it like it's real, it may as well be real.
Right. Right. Exactly.
And we mentioned to Diana that, we believe that you and Terrence are cartographers of consciousness, especially with your experiment at La Chorrera. And she, with her glide language, is sort of like doing the same thing, but in the ocean. You guys were the cartographers on land, and she's in the ocean with her very wavy sort of, download of the language glide. And do you ever consider yourself a cartographer of consciousness?
No, not exactly. I mean, she is a cartographer of consciousness. Yeah. She set out very deliberately to go into these places and really chart it. And but she had the benefit of a couple of decades, and people like Terrence and me. Right. We were not like cartographers. We were not that conscious about it. We were. We're sort of stumbled into this in a way. We weren't like, we're charting consciousness. I mean, we were, but we were lost in some ways. We definitely got off off the beaten track, for sure.
Yeah.
I never thought of it as any kind of systematic mapping of altered states. I mean, Diana's done a lot more of that. I mean, she looks at it she's very conscious about what substances she takes. She takes a variety of substances. She keeps careful notes, and she really is more of a phenomenologist about it. I admire what she does. I decided a long time ago that it's not my job to bioassay every conceivable molecular configuration of, the tryptamine nucleus or some of that. I leave that to more adventurous people like her and Sasha Shulgin and people like that.
Yeah.
My approach to it is, I have so much to learn from the plant teachers that I do work with, which are primarily mushrooms, ayahuasca, and sometimes DMT. These are the old standbys, but I have so much to learn from those. I don't need to know. I am not that interested in what happens if I tweak this methoxy or move that, hydroxy group around to the other side of the ring.
Right.
It's all interesting. I'm glad that people do it.
Yeah.
I don't have time, and I'm too old, and I'm probably too shit scared. Maybe. I don't know. But not really. But I just don't. It's not a place. Not something I spend a lot of time on. I've got other good people doing it, like Diana.
Right.
So she does amazing work.
What do we do as non-scientists, as people that are interested in this subject matter to help what we like to call the transpersonal framework of connectivity? How do we make the world a better place using these things that you and your brother have set up for us, and people like Diana have set up for us? Give us some advice.
Well, the advice is, trust yourself. Don't believe anything anyone tells you. Approach it that way because, this is a quintessentially personal thing. That's the beauty of psychedelics. You don't have to have faith. You don't have to accept what anyone else tells you. So that's really good. So trust your own analytical, capabilities, to explore these places. Share the knowledge. If you're not scientists, there are other ways to get this out there. There's art, and there's what you're doing right now. I think this is very important with the tools that we have to just have these dialogues, make more people. And if you're a hands-on sort of person, grow the plants and teach other people how to do it.
Right.
Teach other people how to grow them and how to use them and spread them around. Think of yourself as a plant person and, get these things spread. And do what plant people always do, which is they trade plants across the back fence.
Right.
These rutabagas are really great. You might want some for your own garden, except give them ayahuasca and chacruna and other things like that. Teach them how to grow them. Yeah. Teach them how to use them. It's the low level revolution kind of thing. It's what gardeners do talking to each other.
Right.
Very, very sort of underground and quiet and because of that, all the more subversive, right? Because nobody's noticing. And pretty soon, it's everywhere. And this is what we're seeing with ayahuasca, now it literally is everywhere.
Right.
And how did that happen? 20 years ago, it wasn't everywhere. And 20 years ago, a few people knew about it. Nobody paid much attention to it. And suddenly it's emerged onto the global stage. And I think that's very interesting. Really, I do believe that it is it's kind of like, I'm a believer in plant intelligence and, not in the sense that they think like we do, but there's a lot of evidence coming out that they do behave and they do have a certain strategy. If you've read anything by Michael Pollan, for example, The Omnivore's Dilemma and all that.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of his best books. And The Botany of Desire. Great writer, by the way. He's the one who wrote the article in the New Yorker recently about the psilocybin mushrooms.
Yeah, we just posted something about that on our Facebook.
Yeah.
So he's the guy, and he wrote a previous one. If you just Google The Intelligent Plant, that was the name of an article he wrote previously. Excellent article. But he makes the point, and in his previous book he made the points that, we think we're domesticating plants. More like plants are domesticating us, and they are bending us to their own purposes, which is to grow. That's what plants do, and spread. That's what they like to do. So they like to initiate symbiosis with us.
Yeah.
And there's no better way to do it than to make these fascinating chemicals, which we take and they make through their photosynthetic creativity, if you will. They're great chemists. I mean, they're wonderful chemists. Right. And, so then they entice us. These are symbiosis-inducing chemicals because, they were probably originally evolved as repellents. I mean, they're bad tasting and they're toxic, right. And they're, they can be toxic. That not something that you want to, you eat an alkaloid-containing plant and it's bitter, right? So that people tend to avoid bitterness. Mm-hmm. But then we have this hypertrophied brain. And we know through trial and error and thousands of years of evolutionary encounters and experience that, a bitter plant is likely to have something interesting in it. So we totally perverted that relationship. The original message was stay away.
Yeah.
And we take it and we say, bitter.
Right.
Maybe we could smoke this thing, or maybe we can brew it, and to the plant, it's all the same. It's actually better for the plant because the plant now has a friend, right. And if we value it, then we want to make sure we have that plant around, so we grow it. That's a great thing for a plant to be domesticated.
Mm-hmm.
It's like suddenly it doesn't have to compete in the wild. So it's on easy street, and we look after it. And of course we do things to it that are probably far worse than anything evolution would do to it. But it's, we selectively breed it and all these things. But the plant survival is pretty much, assured, until we completely destroy the biosphere. At least it's got a free ride until then. And if we're lucky, it will wake us up, so that won't happen.
I think I heard you mention that I think ayahuasca has already made its escape from the jungle. So, thank God, thank the universe that it's made its escape. Right. Just in time.
I have written an essay which is on the net. It's around. It's called Ayahuasca and Human Destiny. Mm-hmm. Which, if you know that essay, you might like it. But that is kind of another articulation of this idea.
Man, we could. We have so many questions for you.
I know, and we have an hour is already passed.
I know. We're gonna have to, if you'd be okay with it, come back on the show soon.
Yeah,
absolutely.
We would love to talk to you again.
I'm happy to do that.
This means so much to us. It's seriously an honor to talk to you. I can't even express how much this means to.
I think you and your brother are gonna live on forever, for years to come, with all these recordings, your brother's lectures, your lectures and videos. It's just incredible, the knowledge that you're going to be feeding so many generations, and you're here on our show, and it's fucking incredible.
Well, I guess that's why we do this stuff, I mean, we do like to talk, and I like to get the ideas out, and, but I'm not a guru, I'm anything, I'm a teacher,
right. Anti-dogmatic.
I'm exploring with you. I'm just a curious monkey, right?
We all are.
We all are, and that's a good thing to be. So I'd be happy to come on your show anytime.
Excellent.
It's always a pleasure talking to good interviewers.
We're gonna have to figure that out because we'll have you back as soon as we can.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely.
Okay.
All right. Well, you have a great night, Dennis. Thank you so much.
All right. You too. Talk soon.
Thanks again for listening to our conversation with the great Dennis Mckenna. If you'd like to find out any more information on him, you can head on over to brotherhoodofthescreamingabyss.com.
If you want to learn more about the research we were discussing during the conversation, you can check out the Heffter Institute at heffter.org and maps.org. Please go like us on Facebook. We have a new page. We'd like to get those likes up. Follow us on Twitter and follow us at Instagram at Tink Club.
Let us know what you like. Let us know what you don't like. Let us know who you'd like us to interview, or tell us if you'd like to be interviewed. Maybe that could work out. Speaking of interviews, next week we have Brad Burge from Maps on, and I heard it's going to be a groovy one. So get out your bell bottoms and pop in those earbuds. I know they don't match, but next week they will. Thank you later.
Suddenly flies up and a girl